Hey guys, with me today, I have a very dear friend. His name is Darren Martin. Would you please say, hey Darren, how are you? Now that we've got that awkwardness over. Hey, Darren has been a friend of mine for a number of years. I met him at Richlands High School because we worked together. He was actually my assistant principal, but he's been a teacher. He's been an administrator. He has also taught at the collegiate level, and right now lives in Bluefield with his family and owns his own company where he provides leadership to a number of school systems. So very thankful for his willingness. When I began preparing for this message, I immediately called Darren and just wanted to have some conversation with him. The more that I had with him, the more I realized I wanted to extend that conversation to this stage. And so, Darren, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Craig, for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
So this morning, one of the things that we looked at in the scripture was understanding that the gospel really calls for us not only to understand our relationship with God, but to understand our relationship with each other better, regardless of race or ethnicity. That's the call for us, that it is a different call maybe than what the world always embraces, but there are obstacles to that call. I want to look at 3 obstacles this morning, and I want you to have the opportunity to share maybe some perspective with our folks today. I've enjoyed our conversations, and I trust that they will glean wisdom from them as well. The first of those is pride. Pride. And so when I look at our world and I look at our culture, pride is a funny thing because I can see 2 sides of it. I can see the pride in our heritage, but then I also see the ugliness of pride when it raises one ethnicity above the other. So how do we deal with the obstacle of pride, Darren? And how do we move through, how do we process it to where we can see improved racial reconciliation? What are your thoughts?
Well, what you said about pride is true. We've been taught early in our life to have pride in our work and pride in ourselves, and we use that to gain success and accomplishments through life. And then all of a sudden, one day we realize, or we start thinking that we've accomplished this on our own, and we start looking for faults in others because they may not be like us. And we start judging them, and unfortunately, sometimes we only see their faults, and we don't see the positives and the goodness in them because of this so-called pride. It's tough, and it's a challenge for us. It's a slippery slope. But what I hope is that we realize, like through your message today, that God wants us to be together. He's wired us to be connected to each other, to know each other, and to be known. And we have to be wise and make sure that we don't fall into that trap of thinking only of ourselves and not looking at others. It's kind of funny stories. I don't think we know each other. I think, unfortunately, we eat together and we go to school together and we work together, but I don't know as we look at individual races that we truly know one another. And we can actually, if we start to do that, we see some commonalities. And I'll give a quick example. I never start out anything by saying this, but my wife is Caucasian. I've never said that. I don't think I've ever said that ever before. But on our first beach trip, I started putting on sunscreen, and I bought an umbrella to sit under. And she looked at me and she said, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Because I don't want to burn and I don't want to tan." And she looked at me and she said, "But African Americans don't burn and they don't tan." And I said, "How do you know?" And she said, "My sister told me." And I said, "But your sister's Caucasian too." So as we went on, and unfortunately, I have to be, she had a burn. She had a real bad burn that day because she stayed out in the sun. But as we've lived together for the last 10 or 12 years, I'm going to get in trouble over that because I don't remember how long. As we've lived, she knows now that I do tan. And she sees that in my older kids. When we were in Hawaii a couple of years ago, she looked and she said, "You guys have to get out of the sun. We've only been here for 2 days." So it's only once we get to know each other, then we can start letting some of the stuff go.
Darren, I really appreciate that. And I agree. I think so many times pride manifests itself in fear, and fear sometimes is certainly related to the fact we don't really know each other. So maybe that could be a takeaway for us. The second obstacle I wanted you to have a chance to address is what I also fear happens over the long haul. It's the obstacle of hopelessness, that somehow we look back in the past and we see just such a longevity of racism or ethnic separation that we can just lose hope that things will ever be different. And man, one of the reasons I called you, one of the reasons that I wanted you to come before us today was I know some of the experiences that you've had that have stemmed from racism, but somehow you've had a resolve not to lose hope. How did you do it? And more importantly, maybe there's somebody that's here today and thinking, is it ever going to get better? What would you share for them to not lose hope as well?
Well, it's been said that we can go 40 days without food, 4 days without water, 4 minutes without oxygen, but only 4 seconds without hope. Just thinking about you inviting us here today to talk about this issue is hope enough. I mean, that's hope enough. You're taking on a challenge of something that is uncomfortable. Race is uncomfortable. But for you to openly do that lets you know that hope is alive. And I'll tell you that I surround myself, or try to surround myself. I do get frustrated. There's things that have happened to me that sometimes I get upset, and sometimes I'm frustrated, and at times I'm angry. But I've had a mother and father throughout my life to say, "This shall pass." I've had friends in my life, and one, and you know him, Tom Brewster from Bluefield, who may be at the Bluefield campus today, but he said once to me, "The best revenge is living well." And then I have my wife that when I'm frustrated, she listens, and then she says, "Let's move on." And with people like that in your life, that gives you the hope to know that we're going to be challenged, but we have to overcome those challenges. And then we have to surround ourselves with people like you, people like I've just described, to move on. The gospel's it. You're right when you said the gospel gives us hope. It's nothing like just when I'm driving and I'm having a bad day and I put on some religious music. By the time you get out of the car, you've forgotten everything that you were worried about.
Right. Well, I want to talk about one last obstacle, and it's the obstacle that I think may be most prevalent in our day and area, and it's the obstacle of apathy. Apathy. Just somehow losing sight of the issue, because I think they may not grow hopeless, but sometimes I think we just look at it and we become indifferent towards it because we see it's always been, it's always going to be. We lose interest in pursuing something different. And then I also think that there is a generation before us that almost would look and go, what's the big deal? Isn't that something in the past? Surely we're not still dealing with that today, right? And so apathy, I think, seems to still be a real player in our world today, in our generation. How do you address apathy, and what can we do to press towards? I think about Martin Luther saying, "Hey, I've got a dream." How do you keep a dream alive generation after generation in the hearts of young people?
Well, you're right about an apathetic view. I've heard a lot of things through my life, and we don't own slaves. My family was poor. Slavery's over. And in my recent life, I've been told, "Well, Darren, you have a good life. You're living the American dream. You have nice things. You finished college. What do you have to complain about? How have you experienced racism?" And I guess no one understands that when you walk in a store and someone follows you, I don't walk in with my W-2. I don't walk in with my college diplomas. And I don't walk in with the Bible saying I'm a religious person and I believe. I just walk in a pair of jeans and a T-shirt, and then I get followed. It still does exist. I think the thing is though, we just have to be, like I said earlier, we have to know each other and understand each other and realize that things in this world exist and that we might be experiencing something that others aren't, or somebody might be experiencing something that we're not. I told my son, he wants to play collegiate basketball, and we were at an AAU basketball conference or game tournament a couple of weeks ago, and he didn't play his best. And at the end of the game, we were on our way home, and I commented on how he didn't play. I said, you didn't play hard. And he said, Dad, it's not a live session, meaning that no college coaches were there. So he said, if they're not there, why should I play? And I said, you never know who's watching. You don't know if a college coach came in. You don't know who's watching. I was watching. Your little brother who admires you was watching. There's a fan in the stand that's watching. Always do your best and always put your best foot forward. And I think that's true for us and as Christians. I think if we, as Christians, we're like the gatekeepers. People know who the Christians are in the room. And if we accept someone doing something wrong, that almost opens the door and validates the wrongdoing. We have to stand up and say no. We have to have the courage to say no.
Darren, I really appreciate your words and sharing the stories and the perspective that you've allowed us to gain from today. I would say before these guys, man, I love you. I'm thankful for you as my friend. I remember when we both ended up having thyroid cancer. Darren had it before I did, and I didn't even know that he became aware of my diagnosis, but he was one of the first people to call me and to check on me. I've never forgot that. I appreciate just the relationship that God has blessed us with. Thank you for being with us today.